A day after Andhra Pradesh became the first state to reserve 75% of jobs for locals in the private sector, PMK founder S. Ramados has demanded a similar reservation of up to 80% for locals in Tamil Nadu. Demands for reservation in the private sector is a popular political statement to make. At various times, state governments of Maharashtra, Gujarat, more recently Madhya Pradesh, have either promised or attempted to legislate this reservation. But does it make for good economics? Is it feasible or fair to reserve jobs for locals in a country where 33 million or 8.1% of the workforce were migrants for economic reasons as per the 2001 census? So is reservation in the private sector good politics but bad policy? To speak on this, I am joined this evening by Vijayasai Reddy, MP in the Rajya Sabha and National General Secretary of Vijayasai Congress Party, Garga Chatterjee, political analyst, and Mukund Padmanabhan, former editor at The Hindu. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today. Mr. Reddy, let me start by asking why this makes sense. Now, I know it's a good political statement. It was one of your promises before the polls, and your chief, Jagan Reddy, won handsomely. But does it make sense for the state?
Yeah. Yes. See, during our party president, Sri Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy Garu, during his Padayatra of 14 months and covering about 3,640 kilometers, has made a promise to the people of Andhra Pradesh that he would provide employment to the locals to the extent of 75% of the employment generated by in private sector. Secondly, while the state has been bifurcated, the promises that have been made to the residuary state of Andhra Pradesh have not been fulfilled by the previous government as well as the current government. Had the special category status been granted to the residuary state of Andhra Pradesh, the Andhra Pradesh would have developed both in industrial sector as well as the service sector, and also the agricultural sector would also have developed on par with the industrial and the service sector. Since the present government is not inclined so favorably to grant the special category status for political reasons, it is imperative, it is necessary for the state of Andhra Pradesh to have this reservation, and so that the youth, particularly the youth, would be satisfied, and which are unemployed right now. In fact, in India, particularly Andhra Pradesh, 60% of the people are dependent on either agriculture or agricultural products or agricultural services. Therefore, since on and off there are droughts, and then agricultural sector depends upon the vagary of the nature, it is necessary for the state of Andhra Pradesh completely not relying, while some of the family members can rely on agriculture, particularly the youth and other family members should have the employment, so that the per capita income and growth of the state domestic product would go up.
Yeah, no,
in fact,
Mr. Reddy, if I may come in.
In fact, if you see the industrial development, some more time.
Yeah, okay.
No.
Okay. Yes, of course. Yes, please go.
Yes. Coming to the industrial development, share of Andhra Pradesh in industrial development is only 9.6%, whereas the national average is 16.7%. When the state was bifurcated, the estimated revenue deficit was approximately about 22,000 crores, whereas in reality, when you see the revised budget figures now, actual figures, it is 66,000 crores is the revenue deficit. And whereas when the state was bifurcated, the public debt that has come to the state of Andhra Pradesh was 58%, and then the real revenue income, the revenues to the extent of 47% only has come to the state of Andhra Pradesh. In the light of this background, it is very much necessary for the state and to satisfy the youth of Andhra Pradesh and provide employment. The Andhra Pradesh government, the Chief Minister Sri Jagan Mohan Reddy Garu has decided to have gram secretariats and also the volunteers we together would provide employment for the to the youth to
Mr.
the
Reddy,
extent
if I
of
may go get a question in, please, sir.
1,000.
If I request you
youth.
to take my question so that we can take the debate forward.
Yes.
I got the basic point, and you have
Yes.
explained, and your party has
Yes.
explained why you've done it. You promised it before the poll, so you fulfilled a poll promise. I understand that. I'm asking if it makes sense. And an important point that you made, that if we had got special category status, the question would have been different. We need to develop the state industrially. That's why we've reserved jobs. My question to you, sir, is aren't you contradicting yourself? Because if you reserve jobs, aren't you in a way, making it unattractive for companies to come and set up shop in your state? And that in turn will reduce the number of jobs which are available, and out of those you will then reserve 70%. So isn't it like a vicious cycle that you've embarked upon?
Definitely not. If you see the number of engineering students who are coming out of engineering colleges in Andhra Pradesh, when compared to the other states, it is significantly high. And then the technical, even in the technical sector, the number of students every year coming out of the colleges and universities in Andhra Pradesh are relatively high. And in fact, many youth who are qualified are migrating to the other countries like America, Europe, and other Australian. And if you see the number of NRIs who are employed there abroad are youth from Andhra Pradesh. Therefore, it is for the private company, for the private sector to employ them is very easy, and qualified people in Andhra are available. Therefore, they must be provided employment rather than allowing them to go abroad and then render their services abroad. It is definitely
I was going to just come to that. The number of qualified engineers, qualified people from the state doing great things in the United States, in other parts of the country are so many. So how would that work? But I want to get in Mukund, Padmanabhan to weigh in on this. And Mukund, of course, Andhra Pradesh has started this, but this is a demand across several states. Every chief minister or prospective chief minister or hopeful chief minister wants to promise this because it knows it resonates well with the locals. Does it make good sense in terms of policy?
Tamanna, I think several states have debated reservation in the context of the private sector when it comes to dealing with socially backward people.
Yes.
This has been something even the center has had a discussion about. But this attempt by Andhra is reservation in terms of what they call local candidates. So it is jobs for Andhrites. And in this connection, yes, you've had Kamal Nath saying something about it, and maybe a couple of others, and the PMK, as you pointed out yourself, have said something too. But my problem with the entire way this has done is the massive statistics that was quoted now about Andhra Pradesh economic position. Do we have any data, or do they have any data about how many people, how many factories registered under the Factory Act have less than 75% from Andhra Pradesh? Do they have the statistic for JVs? They are the relevant statistics. Otherwise, this just is if I imagine that in many areas, it's just simpler for industries and small industries and so on to simply hire people from the local area. I mean, is this a problem, first of all? And I'm not sure if this is the problem, and nobody has conclusively established that somehow industries in Andhra are hiring people outside and not Andhrites themselves. The other thing is, what kind of industries is this, the impact of this? I see two issues. One is in the sort of mind industries, if you like, software and so on. You can't have a policy like this and be viable. I can't see, Andhra developing anything like a software, IT sector if this policy is in place. It is the end of it. The second thing is what happens to areas which are close or contiguous to other states. I mean, Andhra Pradesh has, for instance, a Sri city, which is like, a large parcel of land which is privately owned, which is meant to attract industry and so on. It's like an industrial estate. but it feeds off Madras. It's just north of Madras. You know, is that going to be viable at all now? If you're going to say that 75% of the industry has to be, you know, people have to be employed from, you know, Andhra Pradesh alone. Similarly, the other things like Hosur, for instance. So I think these problems have not been thought through clearly at all. And, you know, I think these need further thinking before, you know, this becomes.
Okay, so 2-3 issues that you've raised. One is that is it really a problem, and will mined industries really be able to grow if you have such a rule? Garga, where do you come in on this debate? Several states want to do this. It is politically very popular, but at the end of the day, is it that big a problem, and can you make this a blanket rule, especially for the private sector? I just want to add over here, a number of states that have tried this have made it conditional. So they say that if a certain company or industry is taking incentives from the state, taking any benefits from the state, then we will tell you to reserve. But a blanket rule may be one of the first, and is that a good idea in your view?
I think what Andhra Pradesh has done is extremely bold and positive decision, because at first and foremost, the government of Andhra Pradesh is accountable to the people of Andhra Pradesh and no one else really. Having said that, let us remember a couple of things here. Gujarat, Vijay Rupani recently declared something along very similar lines. Kamal Nath, Madhya Pradesh declared something in similar lines. What does that tell us? It tells us that this issue goes on all sides of the political spectrum. We have a Jagan Mohan Reddy, a federalist party. We have Indian National Congress, which is a the Delhi party, and also BJP, which is a Delhi party, right? So it's across the spectrum. So there is not this versus this here.
Yeah.
Having said that, is this a problem? So I can give you, I can give you the example of Andhra Pradesh itself. A few years ago, Chandrababu Naidu actually mentioned how there's a huge heterogeneity in the total fertility rate of various states in India. Particularly, what is called the Hindi belt has typically double the fertility rate than most non-Hindi states. And how is that consequential? It's consequential because the resources that are put in by a state government to not only SOPs or incentives, but creation of infrastructure and everything, at the end of the day comes from the people of that state. So in Bengal, we have seen a very skewed scenario. From 2001 to 2011, 92 lakh people have come in from outside of state, and a much lesser number have gone out, but a very large number also. Bengal is a net in-migration state. So insofar as we have people who are being forced to go out to look for jobs while job opportunities exist in Bengal itself, is very bad press for the government, because at the end of the day, the state government is accountable to its own people, i.e. voters. Also,
no, so
let us remember
Garga,
that we have
I'm
actually
just
seen,
come in there, and let's keep our responses crisp. 1 minute. I'm just going to come in there and let's add one point at a time.
One very last point. Okay,
finish.
One last point.
Yeah.
So we have had very dangerous practices. We have seen very dangerous practices. Sham Steel is a company which has recently advertised in Bengal that Bengalis will not be hired. And this has happened in various instances.
That's the other extreme. I have not corroborated the claim you're making.
Sort of,
but if that claim is true, that is the other extreme. So no one is saying you should not hire locals, but can you force private businesses? That's a dialogue we should have. Hire locals? Should you force businesses to hire locals? Then why should one set up a business with so many restrictions? Let's look at all of those factors. Mukund, since it's 2 versus 1 in a sense, I want you to come in on some of the points that Garga raised. And yes, absolutely. Mukund is wondering how he's in this position, but yes, you are. Absolutely, the state governments have to be answerable to their voters, and part of that responsibility also means improving the economy of that state and making sure there are more jobs for everyone, and the best qualified people get those jobs.
Well, I mean, I'll say one thing in response to what was said earlier. just the fact that you have, Kamal Nath saying it somewhere or someone saying it in Gujarat doesn't make it a good policy. We have lots of populist policies pushed by state governments. So the mere fact that someone has pushed it or promised it is not a defense of the policy. I think you have to look at the policy and its impact. That's number one. Number two is, if this becomes the norm, I mean, you need to think of this not just in terms of Andhra Pradesh. If you're thinking about this as an Indian, if it's a good policy, it should become a norm. And if it becomes a norm, I just wonder what happens to, employment generally. I mean, there are states, for instance, Kerala, for instance, where, or say even Tamil Nadu, where a lot of the construction labor comes from outside. It comes from the north, and it comes from certain states. What happens to these people? I mean, you might argue they're contract labor, so they may not be covered. But if you start thinking very parochially about this issue, I think you're just going to shrink movement. You're going to shrink employment opportunities, and you're just going to get the reverse of what you wanted. So to me, I haven't heard a very good argument yet for this, apart from the fact that that we need to do something to create jobs for the state. I think there are other ways of doing this, and this kind of reservation is certainly not the way.
Okay, I want Mr. Reddy to come in. Yes, Garga, I know you want to come in, but Mr. Reddy, I need you to come in on a couple of points that Mukund raised earlier. One is that, do you have data to prove that 70% locals are not being hired? The other big question that often arises is, how will you ensure this happens? Who is going to go and check in every place of business who the locals are? How do you define a local? Some of these questions need to be clarified, Mr. Reddy.
I can confidently say that the entire debate and the very concept is misguided. See, when what is local? See, I can go and settle in Andhra Pradesh, or I can go and settle in Tamil Nadu, and I can go settle in Karnataka.
Yeah.
Who is local? Those who are residing there and treated as a locals. Don't misconstrue this as it is neither a linguistic nor a ethnical. So please do not construe that in that sense. See, those who are residing there, where the factories are located, be it a Tamilian or Kannadiga or Bengali or anybody for that matter, those who are residing there and construed as per the definition, if they are locals, then they will be called as locals, and they have every right to claim employment there to the extent of 75%. So the whole concept and then whole debate is misguided. I really don't understand why the debate is being led in that direction.
No, I understand, Mr. Reddy, that locals
we
are
have
defined as
complete
15
data
years.
available as to in fact I am
Yes.
telling you, let me finish off.
Yes.
In fact, if at all there is a skilled work and the skilled labor, as you have pointed out, skilled labor is not available, it is the responsibility of the company. It is the responsibility of the company to make them skilled and then recruit them irrespective of the caste, creed, and then a language or state they belong to.
No.
Secondly, and in case of existing companies, this is not immediately applicable to existing companies. Existing companies will have 3 years time as per the act to make it 75%. Only
Okay.
the new companies which are coming into existence, where these provisions are made applicable.
No, but then you want to attract new companies into the state. Yes, Mukund. Yes, Mukund, please come in.
Yeah, I think he needs to tell us. I mean, it is true that the Act says that, just one point. It is true that the Act says that existing companies are given a 3-year window to sort of fall in line with the Act. Otherwise, there are penal provisions. But surely, somebody needs to say that so many companies in Andhra Pradesh do not meet this criterion. And I haven't found anyone coming up with this piece of statistic to show that local people are not being employed. Otherwise, this is just a populist gimmick in the absence of this data. What is special about Andhra Pradesh? Is it true that companies there are employing only people from outside? Is this a special case? I mean, I think that needs to be addressed squarely.
Garga wants to come in. Garga wants to come in, and Garga, you'll have to admit at the end of the day, it's more about politics. It's more about pleasing the people of that state, hoping they vote you back, and it may be good politics, but does it really make sense? Is it really fair? Is it really legal in a country like India, where, the laws of the land give you the right to travel as an Indian citizen anywhere in the country for work, to settle down anywhere in the country for work? I'm sitting in the city of Mumbai and speaking to you, where this has time and again flared up as a issue of giving prominence to locals, but this is also the financial capital of the country, where millions of people come in every day to find a better life.
This is while, for example, let's take the case of Mumbai. It is true that people from many places come to Mumbai, but at the same time it is true that whenever the municipal elections happen, Mumbai always defeats Bombay hands down, and that tells you something. At the end of the day, India is a union of states, and the states are not random administrative units. These are constituent political units as defined by the Supreme Court. So, if we have practices, and your team can get in touch with me, I can give you a huge number of instances where local people in Bengal, let's say, are being actively discriminated in the whole function of recruitment. It is time that at least governments and states that can attract investment do so for their own people. What we are seeing here is something that exists in state governments anyways. Okay, there is a domicile policy. So who is a local? There are domicile policies which exist, for example, for medical entrance and etc. It's a similar policy. And also, let me also bring to a larger issue that whenever we're talking about outsiders, right? At the end of the day, and I do, maybe the Andhra Pradesh friend of mine may or may not admit, but we are talking about specific states where high fertility rates are actually creating demographic challenges for those states. He may not admit it at this point of time, but it is a real issue on the ground. Also, for central government jobs, for example, they happen in Hindi and English, which means all non-Hindi people who are not very good in English are completely shut out of these central government jobs and tenders. So that tells you that there is an active appeasement that is going on. It's time that that is counteracted.
No. Once again, you're taking this in quite a controversial direction. And let me bring in Mr. Reddy here. In the nation of India, Garga, you are permitted by law. You have a right to travel for work anywhere. Whatever the fertility rates in your state may be, whatever languages you know, you have a right to travel for work. Should that particular state government shut it down because they want to win elections? And let me bring in the business angle. Then what are you doing to industry when you need to actually encourage industry? Aren't you going in the reverse direction? Yes, Garga, that's for you.
Phone call sound.
Okay, Garga can't hear me. We'll connect him back. Let me come to you, Mukund Padmanabhan. The fact is that this is a very, very attractive and popular mode to take. It is likely we've seen Tamil Nadu raise an appeal. It's likely we'll see others do it. Madhya Pradesh has promised, the Chief Minister there, Kamal Nath, could announce this at any time. What is the impact that you see having on business?
Well, I see this as being a deterrent. I don't know how many industries are affected, existing industries. And so in the absence of that knowledge, it's hard to say. I think this will be a deterrent for what I call the mind industries, certainly, because to set aside 75% for people in an area. And I just like in this connection to go back to the legislation itself. The statement of objects and reasons says that, industry comes in, people lose their land, sometimes it's agricultural land, and these people who are described as land losers need to be employed. If that is so, I think the term local, which just means anyone who is domiciled in Andhra Pradesh, is just much too broad. There is a clause that says we will make rules later about whether we give priority to districts or zones. But if the object of the act was to compensate people who had lost their land, which is a very noble and a very a good thing, then I think the least this legislation should have done was to make it clear that the first priority would be given to them. So the entire way this is packaged seems to me to be, it's just coated with populism.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm, in the absence of the data, I'll still repeat what I said.
Yes.
This probably will remain just a gimmick.
If it's a gimmick, quote unquote, it's one which has been tried before as well. I'm going to take a very short break and come back to the other important point, and two of them actually. One is, how will you determine that this is actually being implemented? If it's not, how will you penalize these companies? And at the end of the day, what happens when people from your state want to go elsewhere and work? Aren't their rights impacted as well? As Indians, don't we have the right to work anywhere in the country? We're coming back with all of those points on the debate. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're talking about the move by the Andhra Pradesh government to reserve 70% of jobs for locals in the private sector as well. It's an important issue because other states want to do it as well. There's a demand coming in from Tamil Nadu. There's for long been a demand at the central level. It has featured in manifestos of political parties at various times. The reservations have sometimes been on the basis of caste, sometimes for economic weaker sections, and many a times when it comes to state politics, the demand is for locals. Locals are defined usually by people living in a state for 15 years at least, and then different states have different mechanisms to determine who is a local or not. But there are two major questions that we want to address in this segment of the show. Number one, doesn't the Constitution of India allow every Indian to live and work in every part of the country? And secondly, is this really going to help develop these states? How are state governments going to determine who's following this and who's not? Let me come to Mr. Reddy, very senior leader from Vijayasai Congress, which is currently ruling Andhra Pradesh, on the second part of my question. Mr. Reddy, how will you determine that this is actually being implemented? Because even in the past, various state governments who have thought of doing this and tried to do it in some part or the other have realized that private companies may just not listen. Are you going to crack down on these companies? Won't you be hurting the state economy even more then? How will you determine it? How will you implement?
There cannot be any legal hurdles in implementation of these reservations for the locals. For example, a foreign company which is coming to India and setting up a base on Indian soil has to necessarily follow the Indian laws. So it is mandatory for the company to follow the Indian laws. Similarly, those companies who come to Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or any other state for the matter have to necessarily set up a base there in the respective states, have to necessarily follow the laws of the respective states in case if it is a state law. So in case of central law and central law as well as the state should be followed, and there cannot be any contradiction between the central laws and then state laws. So, so in this particular case, I don't really foresee any problem in implementing this.
My question to you was not the legal hurdle.
It is well within within the constitutional.
No, my question was not the legal hurdle. My question is, how are you going to practically implement it? How is the state going to practically implement it? How are you going to go and check in all the factories, shops, establishments, whether people who are there are 70%? Usually PF data is referred to check From that data, how will you tell who is local and who is not? Since, as you clarified, it's not on linguistic terms that you are determining who is local. How will you actually do it?
Yes, Act is very clear, and it says that there will be an establishment, and reports would be called for from time to time. In fact, a timeline is also prescribed there, and industries, those industries which come and set up the facility there in Andhra Pradesh have to necessarily file the reports. In fact, allow me to go into the details, little more details, because one of the participants has been pointing out that there's lack of database and all. Take for example Vizag. I mean, as I've already pointed out, it is neither a linguistic nor anything else. There is no such discrimination or anything. In Vizag itself, I am very happy to say that it is a cosmopolitan city, and we invite all the other persons. In fact, many people from all over the country have come to Vizag and then doing employment peacefully. When the similar logic, when logic can hold good for public sector, why not private sector? For example, Union Public Service Commission, you have the ratio as to what the locals and what the non-local, what the persons from the other states, and similarly in various sectors. See, when the rule is implemented in the case of UPSC or in the case of Group 1 of the respective state, why not public sector and private sector?
No, because
I really don't understand. In fact, our state has got the statistics, and it is not true to say that we have enacted this law without any statistics. I can show the statistics also.
Okay, Mukund, do you want to respond to that? And the part about if the public sector space can do it, why not the private sector?
Well, I mean, I don't have the statistic with me, and if the state has the statistics, well and good. But to me, a legislation like this makes only sense if somebody can show that under the Factory Act, so many enterprises do not meet the 70% requirement, that there is a problem. All I'm saying is the problem has not been established, number one. Number two, I think you raised, Tamanna, I think a very, very relevant point. Yes, I think the gentleman is right in as much there's a reporting system. So the practical monitoring of whether a company, is in keeping with the law or not, that has been detailed. But what has not been detailed clearly is what does domiciled in a state mean? I mean, I can travel to Andhra Pradesh, for instance, and rent a house and get a job there. Does it mean I'm domiciled? Or do I have to spend 5 years there or 2 years there or what? And I'm just going to come back once more to the statement of objects and reasons, which actually makes some sense to me, because if you're trying to compensate people who have lost their land in an area to growing industrialization, then the focus should be basically connected to that region. And I think the legislation doesn't go so far. It just says anyone resident in the state of Andhra Pradesh.
Yeah.
And then it says we'll make rules later about districts and areas and so on. So in my mind, this has not been thought carefully through. And the details in the legislation do not square up with the statement of purposes.
Okay.
Why the law is being enacted in the first place.
Okay, so that's an interesting point in the context of Andhra Pradesh. But Garga, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of other states also want to do it. I want to ask you about where does this lie in terms of right and wrong, in terms of the question of merit, of allowing private establishment to flourish and find the best talent available, and irrespective of whether the people they choose are of any caste, community, creed, or in that state or from outside. Where does this rule or this proposal, which may be good politics, lie on all of those fronts? And of course the rights of Indians, all Indians, to actually work and find livelihood where they can.
Those are very excellent questions, and let me answer them. The Constitution of India does not have any right to employment, unfortunately. So you have the right to seek employment, you do not have the right to employment. You do not even have the right to move freely anywhere you wish in the Indian Union, for example. Okay? For example, you cannot simply walk into Mizoram, you need an inner line permit. You cannot simply walk into Nagaland, you need an inner line permit. You cannot simply walk into Arunachal Pradesh, you need an inner line permit.
Those are specific
and those are all
cases.
Parts of Article 371
but
A, B, C.
But those are
so
specific exceptions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Specific cases,
Yeah.
specific cases, but specific cases nonetheless part of the Constitution of India, and these are also parts of India. So these are not foreign lands. So having said that, we must remember something at the end of the day. I am a Bengali, I am in West Bengal, and that's why I am an Indian. It's not as if I became an Indian first and then I was given a multiple choice question, do you want to become a Marathi, a Telugu, or a Bengali, right? So at the end of the day, West Bengal to me is India, right? So we have to look at our specific situation first. And the development of West Bengal is development of India. The development of Andhra Pradesh is development of India. There is no contradiction. And in fact, this is a fillip to states which are only into exporting human labor and booming population to actually develop themselves and not export and offload their people. And also, states which are at the receiving end of this have a right to protect their linguistic identity and their cultural sphere from a demographic challenge.
Yeah, but Mr.
And
Reddy
also
has just
seeking
said this is not about
livelihood for
linguistic
their own people
identity.
first.
1 minute,
it's
Garga,
true
Mr.
everywhere
Reddy
in the
has
world.
just said this is not about linguistic identity, and I know what you've been trying to allude
That's
to.
his viewpoint.
I know what you've been trying to allude to. You're talking about, you know, the most populous states of our country in the Hindi heartland. UP, Bihar is everyone's favorite whipping boy across the country, especially come election time. But let's get real, Garga. Let me ask you, as a professional, tomorrow, if you have an opportunity in another state outside your own, what would it feel like if the laws of that state prevent you from getting an opportunity that you are qualified for? Would you find that fair?
At the end of the day, if that is the standard we go by, we are citizens, we live in this earth, okay, and there may be 1 million jobs in the world that I'm best qualified for, but I'm not eligible for. But at the end of the day, my specific case does not decide the broader issue of justice to the people of the state, to the sons and daughters of the soil. They are not in conflict. In fact, I would grow up in a mindset that this is where my best opportunities lie.
But because at the end of the day, policy that is made impacts individuals. It impacts individuals, it impacts individual citizens, it impacts individual companies, and altogether it impacts the economy. That's why at some point or the other, you have to think about what it means for you. For example, when countries all over the world have policies that tighten it and say give jobs to locals first, a lot of times Indians don't like it, because sometimes we're qualified for the best jobs, not just in our country but anywhere in the world. We want the right to take those jobs, don't we? Isn't that a bit of a double standard, Garga?
India does not exactly it's a double standard in a different way. India has one of the worst welcome policies for other people from other states. So we can't really complain on that question. Let's leave aside. Let's talk about India for a moment. See, at this moment, I am at present, you know, what I'm saying, at present, but forever, I have been a non-Hindi person. It means for most jobs of the union government, I cannot apply. If I were to apply for a Bihar government job, maybe an engineering job that I'm well qualified for, and I do not know Hindi, I do not get that job, right? So in fact, the qualifications are part of the whole issue. The qualifications set by the laws of the land, which means also the state, which is also a local.
No, their rule is not that you should know the local language. Mr. Reddy has said very clearly, it's not on linguistic terms. It is about living in that state. You could live
almost
in
the same thing,
in Andhra
right?
Pradesh for 15 years and maybe not know how to read and write, or maybe know how to read or understand, but you may not know how to write. So I think we're confusing the issues here. Anyway, I've run out of time. This has been a fascinating debate, but I will have to end it here.
One very briefly.
Prerogative of the last word goes to me, Garga. fortunately or
Very
unfortunately, and I will
briefly.
just absolutely have to wrap. But I want to thank all of
Okay,
you
fine,
for
fine.
joining us on the debate this evening. It's an interesting issue. There's no clear black and white or right and wrong here, because the rights of people of the state also matter. Politics is also about listening to what the people of the state want. But will you do it at the cost of development of the state, which will eventually impact those very same people? It's a question that politicians need to ask themselves. That's all the time we have on the show this evening. Thank you for joining us.